Well, hello. It's lovely to be with you again. And today we are going to be playing with some photos and fabric. So these are postcard size images which I got from Temu. And normally I find with Temu's printed products that the colors and things aren't very nice and the paper quality sometimes isn't really good. But this is on nice card. It feels about 160 gram weight. And it came in a little box like this. It wasn't expensive. It was maybe £2 or so. So it came like that with a whole lot of little photos in them. And what I love about this particular pack is that it's got hints of blue and some browns and some beigey colors in them. Some of them have got pinks and red. I've got a mixture of young children and older children. I love the fact that some of the pictures have got raggedy edges and that the backgrounds are sort of weathered and looking a little bit flaky, as photographs do when they get old and brittle and they start flaking. There's some lovely patterns and colors here that I could actually use, and yeah, just altogether I must say that I've been very happy with this pack that I got. If I can find the link, I will pop it into the description below, but the Temu ones aren't always that easy. So I've selected a couple of these pictures just to be able to use for our project today, and I'm going to cut this one up. No, let me choose another one. I'm going to cut this one up just simply because it's got easy lines to cut, and then I'm going to round the corners, and I'll show you exactly how many different projects we're going to make with this, and obviously the time can go on and you can make more and more. So that's the first component of our project. The second is some fabric. This is just calico, and I dyed this with some tea that I had. It was a berry tea, so you'll see it's got a very faintly sort of pinky brown color, which I think works well with that. And then I'm going to be working with some recycled card, which is brown. I've got an archival ink, which is permanent and it's waterproof, and that's important because I want to be able to maybe stamp on the fabric and use it. I've got a stamping block. I've got a tongue depressor here to use as a burnisher. I've got a ruler, corner rounder, some Elmer's glue, which is really nice. I love this one because it's purple while it's wet and it dries clear. And then a nice pair of sharp fabric scissors. Those are the basics, and we'll be using a few more things as we go, but don't stress, because for most of the stuff that we're doing you'll have enough equipment at home to be able to do it or make a plan. So having cut up my pictures, I've selected this one to use for my first project, and I've used my corner rounder just to get the edges so that they are not so harsh. And I'm going to show you the first step in being able to make your little projects. All the projects will actually start with a piece of fabric that's glued onto a piece of card, and this is just recycled card, 160 grams, and I'm going to use my Elmer's glue and rub that onto the card, selected especially for camera so that you can see where I've put the glue. And then I'm going to position my fabric over that, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of a border on either side because I would like some of that to show through. And I'm going to use this tongue depressor as a burnisher just to make sure that that is well and truly rubbed down and that I don't have any bubbles. Now I'm going to just use my nice sharp scissors to trim away that excess fabric. Make sure that I'm just wiping the card so that there's no extra glue, and I'm going to use some of my walnut stain distress ink just to ink around the edges of this. And I love the way it picks up on the fabric. It gives it quite a nice sort of texture as well. There we go. It's picking up, I don't know if you can see it, it's picking up quite nicely on that sort of frayed edge. Similar colors, giving it just a little bit more interest. And I'm going to just run the side of my ink pad around the edges like that, just to double up the color there. I'm going to go around the edge of my photograph as well, and then because the photograph itself is actually quite thick, I'm going to use some of my Elmer's glue, the liquid one, just to glue this down and make sure that it bonds nicely. So when you're working with fabric, you need to make sure that you're not using this liquid glue underneath the fabric, because otherwise it might seep through and create an ugly mark. So here's just a very, very basic beginning of a fabric project, and this could be stuck onto the cover of something. Right, so now we're going to move on one step ahead, and we're going to make a little matchbook here, which will look like that when it's finished. I've got the same piece of card, and this particular one is, let me do it in centimeters. It's 14 centimeters long by 6 centimeters, and I've used 1 centimeter fold up at the edge and then simply just folded that over. And then I've taken just a text stamp with my archival ink, and I've just stamped on the front and the back of the cover, just so that I've got a bit of interest. Now, bearing in mind that this little flap is going to fold over here, you want to just make sure that you position this little frayed piece down so that it doesn't get tucked into the bottom. Or alternatively, you could actually work on another piece of card that you could cut to size and glue that one down so it folds over like that. Maybe I'll do that one and this one, because that one, the first one I did, is a bit different. Okay, so we'll use this one. So I'm wanting to position this closer to the top edge than the bottom, so that I've got that little fold over. And again, I'm going to go for my liquid glue just to secure this down. And the cardboard itself is really nice and porous, so it's going to absorb the glue nicely. We had glues in South Africa that were really good, strong glues, but they were so thick and goopy, and they were horrible to work with for these kind of projects, because you always had these sort of lumps and things underneath. Anyway, the only solution was to try and thin them down, and water wasn't a good mix. So because this is quite a thick layering of cardboard and fabric and stuff, you might find that you want to just hold this down for a few minutes. Make sure that you remove any excess glue, and then perhaps just weight this under something like one of these stamping blocks that won't stick to it, just so that everything can have a chance to settle. Then you'll end up with a little matchbook like that has got a lovely little feature to it. And just now I will put some card in there so that I can actually have a little writing spot. So that could go into a tuck spot. Okay, so the next thing that we'll be working with now is making up some tags. And I've just taken some strips of cardboard and just cut them into lengths, and then I did do a video showing you how to make these templates. So this is a piece of plastic that I've done where I've cut off 1 centimeter measured in from the corner on both sides to make a little slot, 1.5, 0.5 and 2 centimeters. So when I have my nice strips of card, I can just put them down and say, okay, I'd like to have a 2 centimeter cutaway there. This one I used was 1.5 centimeters, and to do the other side I just flip that over. So that is a pretty easy, useful little tool to have when you're making these things. So this is the kind of little tag we're going to make. It's not quite finished yet, and my components are as follows. I've got all these little bits and pieces here. I've got some fabric, and I have a piece of lace, and I have this lovely image here as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is to glue down the lace. Now I'm going to glue the lace onto top of the fabric, and again, because I don't want the glue seeping through, I'm going to just put this purple Elmer's glue on the edge of this lace all the way along. And don't worry, it looks alarming at this stage because it's so purple, but it dries clear. And then I'm going to just gently lay this down as straight as I can on this edge, and then use my fingers just to press it into place. Brilliant. So that's the first part. It's a lot easier to do this when it's not secured to the backing. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to flip this over and on the fabric piece here I'm going to just put glue all over. And again, I'm using the Elmer's glue. Now you might wonder why I'm not putting this onto the tag, and that's because the tag is bigger than this piece of fabric, and so I'm not covering the whole piece of card, I'm only covering part of it. And I'm going to just put my tag down, and I want to leave a little bit of space at the top, so I'm going to just line this up with the bottom, leaving a little bit of gap with the card showing through because I like the brown, and then use my fingers, or you could use your burnishing tool just to flatten that down. Right, so we're getting on nicely here. The next thing to do would be to secure my image, and because this is a nice thick card, I'm going to go back to using my liquid Elmer's glue because I want this to really bond nice and strongly. I know that the glue stick is strong, but I just know that this is a little bit stronger just because it's got liquid which will actually soak right into the fabric. I'm going to place this slightly down on the actual tag, and I might need to just hold this for a few minutes in place just so that it has a chance to grip. Okay, you'll notice that the purple is starting to fade away. That's what I'm looking for. It's a bit like those fabric markers you get if you're a quilter. You'll know what I'm talking about, where you have a purple line and it leaves a line while you're working, and then as it starts to dry it fades away. Terribly frustrating when you mark out a whole quilt and you can't quilt it all in one day and the lines just disappear. And then I've got these lovely little blue stamps here. I'm going to just use some of my glue stick to pop these down, and I have a little label, and I'll probably stamp a number in here just now. So we're just going to layer that together. It's given a nice line for the eye. Now I have punched a hole in here, and the next thing I'd like to do is to put an eyelet in. So I'm just going to haul out my crocodile. If you don't have a crocodile, you could always take a ring reinforcement and just color it, you know, and use that to decorate. So I've got a whole selection of different colors here that I could use. I think I'm going to go with this gray one, and I've got another one that I've done, so I'll just have two of those. Okay, so to work with these, I'm going to need to slide the shaft of this through the hole, and then when I've unlocked my crocodile, I'm going to put the shaft point in the top and give that a nice firm squeeze and release. And there I have a very, very nice little eyelet in there. So let's do the other one quickly. Just push that through. There we go. And give it a firm squeeze. And it's as easy as that. Okay, so that one I used a button for decoration, and this one I have just used those two labels, but I think I'm going to find a number to put in there, so I'm going to put that aside now. Right, the next thing that we're going to work on is just to have something that could be used as a dangle or a cluster. There's one that I've done, and here's a second one. So again, I have taken my fabric and I have glued it down onto my card. I took my ink pad and just inked around the edges here because, again, I quite like the frayed look, and I think I might do that once I've finished. Just let's glue everything down and have a look and see what it comes out like. Then let's have a look at the composition and see how we're going to do this. This is a little frayed piece of fabric that I had, quite like that. It's quite nice. I like a little bit of lace, and I like the picture there. It's a bit more feminine having the lace, isn't it? Right, so I think I'm going to do the lace in the middle of this piece of fabric. I can get some of these threads off my fingers, and again I'm going to just use my glue stick, but I'm going to be using the whole piece of lace this time, so it's going to look very purple. And And I must say that I've been playing around with fabric and stamps quite a bit recently. I did a video on working with fabric and stamping the other day, and I'm just loving the look of it. So I'll link that in the description below so that you're able to see that. Let's cut these off in line with the frayed edges. There we go. And then I think if we position that like that, so you've got fabric but the second piece has got a bit of texture. Now line that up. Yes, I like that. So again, I'm going to use my glue stick under this piece of fabric. I don't want to glue down the fringed part, so I'm just going to do the middle section, which is just the whole fabric, and I do want the straight edge of the lace up against the border of this piece of card. There we go. And now I'm going to revert back to my Elmer's glue. Put some on the back of my photograph. And then I'm just going to put her there. And again, you might need to just put a bit of weight on there. And then I have this lovely little stamp that I'm going to just use my glue stick to secure onto here. That, and then with some scraps of fabric that I had, I just made them into little bows. Yeah, that one looks maybe like a nicer one. So for this one, I'm going to just use a little, no, I think I like the first one. I'm just going to use a dollop of the liquid glue at the back of this so that the actual edges of the bow stand free and the tails stand free. And I don't mind the fact that it's a little bit frayed. Okay, right, I can still put a little eyelet into the corner here so that I could actually hang this as a dangle onto a journal. So let's take the large eyelet hole, which is this one, and walk into the corner and punch. But it wasn't very clean. Let me go through here again. When you're stamping through the when you're trying to punch a hole through the fabric as well, you sometimes just need to trim these tassely edges. Sometimes it comes off clean, it's absolutely fine, but there's no way of knowing until you actually do it. And for this lady, I think I'm just going to go with the grey as well. Ties up nicely with a little stamp. There we go. And give that a nice little crimp. There we go. Now that's come out nicely. Great. So I'm going to just let the glues dry, and I'll get some paper so that we can finish that one, and then I'll show you one more before we finish the video. So I did make one more thing that I didn't show you, but now that we've made a few of these other pieces of ephemera, you'll have the idea. I cut 2 triangles of card, and I glued on some fabric and some very old ribbon. This was from my grandmother, and I just used my walnut stain just to edge the ends of the ribbon, and I think it's picked up quite nicely on the texture. And then I mounted a bit of lace onto some card, and for that I used my glue stick. And then when that had dried, I stuck my photo down with really a nice oversized button, just to be very nice and bold and masculine for ephemera. So that in itself will make a very nice little tuck spot that I can put things into on the side of the page. And then for the opposite side of a page, so that was for a left hand corner and this is for a right hand corner, I did the same thing, except I found this really cute picture of this little girl and I made this bow, and this was one of my grand's vintage buttons, and they'd covered them so beautifully with just a bit of cotton back in the day, but that is very old and worn. So that would be for a right hand page. I might just need another tab of a bit of the cold glue on there, or the craft glue. And then these were little postcards that I'd made by sticking fabric onto a piece of card and then stamping on them. And as I mentioned, I'll link the video that I did on stamping on fabric so that you can have a look at that. Then we made our 2 lovely tags, and I've just used some baker's twine here just to put the tassels on, so those will be very nice. We have our little matchbooks with a little journaling spot inside. I've used 2 little brads just to secure them on the ends, and I've cut away the corners here just to make this sliding in of the matchbook very much easier and also a lot neater. So we've got that one there, and then we've got a second one, and then we've got our 2 giant tabs, which would obviously go onto the sides of your pages. I love those because I just think they're really nice, and if you wanted to, you could just glue down those sides and have some way of tucking something in on the top. In fact, let me put this up at the top here. And then we have these 2 little dangles. This is that lovely one with the lady, again with fabric and a bit of lace, and here I've stuck 1 piece of fabric on top of another, so this is a second piece of fabric. I don't know if you can see it, I've got 2 lots of tassels there, but I stuck that down, and I edged this using my walnut stain ink pad and frayed right up to the edge, and I actually think that's given it quite nice definition. And then just using a little bulb pin here to have somewhere to hang that. I've done the same on here, except I used a stamp with a bit of stitching just to create that border, and so we've got that as well. So there you have it, a whole selection of different things that you can use with photographs and fabric. I love the play of it, and I love the feeling that the fabric itself lends a sort of vintage vibe to the whole thing, but it also softens all the sort of brown tones that we have. So if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and consider sharing this video. And thank you so much for joining me. It's been lovely to be with you. Bye for now.